Greetings ladies and gents, and welcome to this match video for Mud's mission taken from the website Royal Road. As always, I hope that you all enjoy this episode, and if you do, please consider supporting the channel. Also, all of these episodes will be available as a podcast on the various different podcast platforms. All the links will be down below. Chapter 65, Magnificent Melody. It's finally time for my stage debut. Big Brother made me hold back in the first fight so that he could try some tactic. I didn't mind though, because it only built suspense. They were all saying he won without even drawing his sword. The suspense has been built. They're all imagining what wonders his beautiful sword will show them. I can't let my audience down. My dancer partner is an ugly thing, covered in scars with a nasty attitude, all the better for the villain in our party. It's almost time now. The curtains are opening. Begin. In an instant, the ugly brute vanished. Big Brother already told me about his trick. Cobb appeared behind Mud, swinging his curved blade in a wide sweep towards Big Brother's neck. I elegantly slipped out of my beautiful sheath, only part way, but enough to block the villain's attack. Sparks fly as metal meets a shinier metal. Sliding smoothly out of the scabbard, I do an elegant sweep towards the rogue's stomach, but he dodges back nimbly. Oh, the crowd is awed by our rapid exchange. This is what I live for, the adoring crowd, the dancer battle. But something is still missing. Yesterday, as we walked through the town, I heard the most lovely sound coming from the buildings, bars and restaurants mostly. The rhythmic sounds of smooth melodies inspired me. The present that my brother gave me was a curious thing. It could only send sounds, but they can be anything I can imagine. It would take too much concentration to send every person individually. But if I just send it to everyone without discrimination, it's easy enough. We need music for our dance, beating of drums, and the lighter sounds of the instruments I never saw. Soft sounds like the whistling of a wind, harsh sounds like the squawking of great birds. What is this music? Cobb rebalanced his stance and eyed Mud. Of course, he looked at me too, floating above Brother's head. That's Mud's execution song. Nobody who's ever heard it has lived. It's sound of your own death. The energetic boy is yelling again. Cobb turned to the child and yelled, "You idiot! Can you hear it too? That would mean that you're going to die." Foolish to take your eyes off of the hero. I lunged towards the villain. Brother helps push me faster with his magic. I told him to let me handle this fight, but this much is fine. Ah! Cobb jumped to the side, narrowly deflecting my lunge. Keeping pressure against his inferior sword, I rapidly swing around to the other side. Suddenly, inside his defense, I sweep forward, aiming to take off his head. Reacting just in time, Cobb leans far backwards, nearly striking his head on the floor. Swinging back upright after my swing missed, he moves to run back towards Mud. Not so fast. I continue my swing around in a circle and come for a second pass at him. But, I was predicted. Cobb unexpectedly steps towards my handle, and with his free hand grasps me. How shocking. What an unexpected twist. I set the mood by slowing the music's tempo, and I focus more on the drums. The crowd is on the edge of their seats. They think Mud is done for now, his sword taken from him. Now Cobb needs only to approach and kill him. 1 step. 2. He's drawing near, Brother, now. This is it. The perfect time to shift the balance of the maximum drama. The second city I realized when I spoke that was the nice blacksmith, Garima of infinite weight. Cute trick with the sword, but what? The villain's speech was cut short as he falls sideways, the feather-lined sword in his hand, suddenly the weight of a building. I crash into the ground and leave a small crater. Some of his fingers are crushed under my weight. Ah! Pathetic yell escapes Cobb's fingers. With a sudden surge of strength, he wrenches his twisted fingers out from underneath me. I release the weight and float into the air. The theatric enough trick, but he uses too much of my SP to use too often. After making an elegant twirl, I return to a fighting position, blade pointed towards the villain's heart. Cobb holds his broken hand in front of his face. A grin twists his face. Slowly, he drags the blood across his forehead. The heckling boy yells out, "That's it, the blood jester is going to use his secret technique." Cobb didn't argue back this time. He only laughed, as though in a trance. I silence the flutes and horns. Only the beat of the drums remain. Like a heartbeat. After his head is covered in blood, the jester raises his right arm, and he pulls his sword close, and he slowly drags the blade across his chest. A waterfall of blood falls from the open wound and coats his body. Of course, I could attack during the performance, but what an anticlimactic thing that would be. Instead, I wait for my dance partner to finish his solo performance. After he takes a long look at his blade, his wild eyes turn towards mud. Now, it's time. The flutes and horns return as the villain rushes towards the motionless mud. I move into his path, his arm high for a swing. He cannot guard. I stab towards his exposed stomach, my blade making contact with his blood-soaked torso with no resistance. I slide along the abdominal muscles in a slicing motion. What is this? My blade sinks into the blood, much thicker on his body than I expected. I sink in, but stop before reaching his skin. The force of the lunatic's charge carries me with it. We're near brother now. Desperately, I swing again. As before, I'm stopped with the strange blood. I search for a spot free of blood to strike, but this entire body is covered. He swings his arm at brother. Unacceptable. Pulling back from the attacking, I set myself to a steep angle above my brother. Like a raindrop sliding down a leaf, the swing slides down me and falls harmlessly to the side. The jester swings again, but again I deflect it to the side. Again and again a storm of blows rains down upon me. After a dozen failed strikes, Cobb steps back to form a plan, a hint of sanity returning to his eyes. Taking the chance, I launch myself like a bullet towards the villain's eyes. Not even bothering to block, he simply leans forward so the strike will hit his blood-soaked forehead. Just as planned. As the last second, I adjust my flight to the left side, hooking my handle over his shoulder, blade resting on his back. Garima! Cobb is smashed to the ground with his ribs buckling under the pressure. I was going to perform this dance alone, but if nobody can see his spell, it should be fine. Brother, strike him with some force bolts while he can't move. To his credit, brother performed his role perfectly. Without moving, he sent countless blasts into the prone form of Cobb. The villain struggled and leaned, trying to get me off of him, but the blows soon stopped his resistance. Soon he stopped moving and the judge approached. Stop! The fight is over! I floated off the body of Cobb and an imprint of my body on his back, a memento of our dance. Brother cleaned the blood off me with his telekinesis. With one more elegant spin, I returned to my scabbard. With one last dramatic drum solo, the music halts. The dance is complete. The judge raises a hand above brother. The winner is Mud. A wild applause rips through the audience. Spectators are packed densely into a semicircle ring around our ring. A crowd ending exactly at the range of my telepathy. Our biggest fan, the energetic boy, yells out, "Did you see that? Executioner Mud beat him without moving." End of chapter. Chapter 66. Mist and Mats. The purity of the soul emanations. Let not the arts of man corrupt you. Men, twisted by paint, become the painters. This filthy mirror needs no more ink. Can you even see yourself any more? Coated as you are in so much obscuring pigment, From the side, the conspirator adds the painting. Strange forms to torment you. Nasty, poisonous things, shapes of spikes and claws and teeth and rot. Disgusting art betrays a disgusting painter. Abraxas, perhaps worse than his king. Do you think covering his works with your own scrawling will solve the issue? No, you fall only deeper into the hands of Yaldabaoth. The paint grows thicker, and the truth only further obscured. There is a better way, a true way. Wipe away the paint with the pure emanations. It is possible if you have only the will and the soul alone. When the lies are swept away, the mirror will be revealed. When the mirror is shattered, the path to the infinite is laid bare. Follow the path and return to the astral. Excerpt from Return to the Astral. I finally have to fight. What a drag. Jabrax made her way to the indicated mark on the ground. Opposite her was Abraxas's spawn. She resembled a Tier 0 bear, but the spark of intelligence in her eyes revealed her true nature. The demon clenched her fist. It would be annoying fighting while hiding her true form. The association had certain reasons for accepting demons in the ranks, but it would be a problem if royalty, or, worse yet, the church figured out her game. The judge, some worthless mortal, asked if she was ready, trying to act superior to her. Jabrax had to resist the urge to rip out his throat. Putting on her well-practiced fake smile, she responded politely, "Yes, sir, I'm ready." A growl came from the bear. Apparently she was named Ursula, named after the ancient empire term for a bear. How uncreative must her parents be? Cattle names are so idiotic, with no significance, just a label to slap on each other. Names are meant to have meaning, not just some linguistic tool. The judge stepped back and raised his arm sharply. "Begin." Expecting the bear to lunge at her and initiate close-quarters combat, Jabrax was surprised when she instead released a red dart from a pointing claw. A mage, but her hair is black. She must have dyed it. A common trick, but a rare one for a magical beast to use. They usually prefer to show off their strength. Caught off guard by the unexpected attack, Jabrax was struck in the torso. A shimmering red line formed between herself and Ursula. Jabrax checked her body, but there appeared to be no damage or difficulty moving. The effect was likely something more complex. Jabrax reached for her own opponent's surface thoughts while corrupting her own manner with the ideal of dreaming. Prey that tries to flee, the hunter draws closer. Some sort of ideal. Suddenly, the tether drew taut and the bear rocketed forward, pulling along an unseen force. Such an obvious attack. Jabrax released a cloud of purplish mist from her mouth, forming a wall between her and the bear. Undeterred, Ursula rocketed forward through the mist. Jabrax again evaded to the side, but the bear's path curved with her, always traveling nearer. Drawing close, massive paws swung towards the demon's head. Jabrax concentrated on a second ideal, the one which she was most confident with. It was unfortunate to reveal information about herself so early in the tournament, but taking that blow was not an option. In Jabrax's mind, the image of a perfect chair took form, perfectly comfortable, perfectly sized, always where it needed to be. Countless properties of the ideal of a chair took into Jabrax's mind, corrupting her manner. She tainted it with the concept of the study improvised weapon, as an aspect of the chair that she had mastered in barroom brawls. Swinging her invisible chair forward, a lump of mana collided with a heavy paw. With a booming noise, the bear and Jabrax were forced apart. Landing a short distance away, the bear wobbled slightly. Good. The toxin is taking effect. It would be some time with such a large body, unfortunately. Again, Jabrax read the bear's surface thoughts. In the end, the quarry is only food. The hunter's jaws cut through the meat. A red spectral set of jaws rocketed down the red tether towards Jabrax. With a spin, the demon threw her improvised weapon towards the maw, while the hunter's mouth was suitable for slicing flesh. Eating a chair didn't really mesh with the concept. Failing to bite through the invisible chair, the teeth shattered. Meanwhile, Jabrak stated a corrupted manner with a different aspect of the ideal of chair. The ideal chair is perfectly comfortable and inviting to sit in. Just a glance tells you just how wonderful it would be to rest your tired legs. Of course, a chair is meant to be sat in. The perfect chair needs to have an occupant. If there is none, one will soon arrive. In the middle of the arena, the most beautiful chair in the world appeared. The smooth edges, the high-class materials, the soft, cushy seat. For a moment, everyone in the arena moved towards the chair. Acting in a flash, the great magician Magnus sat up and waved his wand towards the ring. Instantly, a transparent dome appeared around the ring. Everyone in the arena now stepped back in disgust. Visible in the center of the ring was the worst chair that they'd ever seen. It was filthy, broken, misshapen, jagged, sharp, and hard. It was just barely recognizable as a chair. With the dome, however, the perfect chair still sat, in all its glory. Ursula walked towards it, her hunt forgotten. The billowing cloud of purple fog was likewise ignored. Finally, the wonderful thing, the bear, turned and, with no hesitation, sat down. Of course, the curves of the chair fit her size perfectly. Pure bliss, this is so wonderful. I could stay here for the rest of my life. Jabrak grinned. The fight was over. Within a minute, the bear was snoozing peaceably, and the demon dispelled the perfect chair, and Ursula fell to the floor, but did not awaken. The moment later, the dome around the ring was likewise dispelled. Hesitating for a moment, the judge returned to the ring. Kneeling down, he checked Ursula's condition. Finding her unresponsive, he stood up and lifted a hand high above Jabrak's. The winner of this duel is Jabrak the Red. Cheers rang out from the stands. Disgusting worms, you have no right to cheer my name, even if it's only part. Despite her venomous thoughts, Jabrak smiled and waved lightly towards the crowd. Magnus, what was that? Prince Kane approached the orange-robed associate from behind. Looking up, the old man nodded in greeting. Ah, Prince Kane, that, I believe, was the perfect chair. Prince Kane rubbed his chin in thought, looking down at the figure Jabrak the Red as she disappeared into the tunnel leading into the VIP area. I gathered that much, but what kind of ideal let you summon a perfect chair? Magnus chuckled and shrugged. The ideal of chair, obviously. A bewildered expression appeared on the prince's face. Surely you jest. Who in their right mind would learn chair magic? That's idiotic. Naive. You're too naive. The great magician jabbed the prince in the gut with his bony finger. There is no such thing as a weak ideal. You're like one of those children saying heat is stronger magic because it can make fireballs. Ugh. Magnus crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair. Do you know how much I was insulted by my youth for following a weak magic like the ideal of opposite? Well, now, who's laughing, huh? I'm great, and you all probably died fighting a troll. Magnus waved a hand angrily at the imagined faces of his childhood tormentors. Prince Kane waited for his elderly mentor to calm down before replying. He was used to these sorts of outbursts. After Magnus stopped mumbling under his breath, Kane asked his second question. What about that smoke? Was that a form of chair magic too? Huh? Oh, heavens, no. That was just dream magic. Common stuff. Just don't breathe it in and you'll be fine. Honestly, you should be more worried about getting chaired in that dream magic. Somehow, Prince Kane had a hard time considering getting chaired a serious threat. End of chapter. Chapter 67, Melodrama. The rounds passed quickly now. Mad's guide had warned that there would be little time to rest before the next round. Apparently, Thagigul was pushing to complete the tournament as quickly as possible. Mud had no frame of reference for how long the tournament should take, but the efficiency at display was impressive. Some of the fights had dragged on long, however, and it was nearing the afternoon. Being forced to wait in place, Mud could only meditate on ideals. Eventually, the guide returned again. Mud, you're up. The golem followed behind as instructed, returning once again to the roaring arena. Emerging from the tunnel, Mud saw that the arena had been restructured. The wide open space was dominated now by only a much larger rings. In one, Prince Cain stood opposite an elderly human with long hair, nearly to his knees, an old walking cane in his hand, wearing a strangely designed silk outfit that ballooned out near the bottom. The sleeves hung wide and loose, and he wore wooden sandals at his feet, similar to Shin. The judge for the prince's fight was a stylish cantor. Unfortunately, Mud did not have the luxury of focusing on the upcoming battle. Entering his own ring, Mud stood on his designated spot, the judge a prim woman. Opposite stood Mud's opponent. "Executioner Mud!" A needlessly loud voice yelled out. Susie stood tall, one hand on her hip and the other supporting her long spear, theatrically pointing her spear towards the golem. She continued, "We meet again, a worthy rival for the Raven." Mud simply waited in silence for the round to begin. A feeling of intense dissatisfaction soon flowed from Ego. Before Mud could ask her what was wrong, a voice appeared in his head. Strangely, it was his own voice, or rather Ego imitating his own voice. "The Raven. How ironic that the two of us, who live in the shadows of society, must now fight in the light of day. It seems the invisible hand of fate has bound us together, two spirits stained in darkness, destined to oppose each other." Susie blocked her face with a stretched open palm and turned her head slightly away. "Indeed. Perhaps it's destiny. Those with special fate are drawn to each other." Susie's eyes scanned the crowd, the curious at what she was looking for. Mud checked too. Everyone was leaning forward in their seat, listening intently to their interaction. Those at the edge of Ego's telepathy-projected voice were whispering to those outside the range, recounting his words, or rather, Ego's words. "I knew you were special from the day we met so long ago. Wasn't that only 3 days ago? And they never actually met, when you casually destroyed that great old growth tree with a single spell. It was a small tree, though, but I think that I'll let you off easy, just because we're childhood friends." "We're friends? Judge? I'm ready." Susie dramatically swung down her arm. With a burst of mana, 2 black masses resembling wings burst forth from her back, but for a moment, and then faded. A complicated expression twisted on the judge's faces. Mechanically, she turned towards Mud. "Are you ready, Fighter Mud?" The energetic youth leaned over the barrier once again. "That's Executioner Mud!" At some point, he had painted a depiction of Mud's face on his shirt, the words Executioner Mud written below in sloppy handwriting. "My spirit burns mightily. A worthy adversary. I'm ready." Mud had no idea what Ego was talking about. Instead, it simply readied itself for battle. "Begin." The judge raised her arm and sharply stepped back. Immediately, Susie stabbed forward with a spear and a bolt of black-rimmed white light shooting at the tip. Dodging to the side, Mud fired a force bolt towards the projectile, curious at the interaction. On impact, the black projectile's flight path was shifted, deflecting it to the side. Additionally, the bolt shrunk slightly. When the bolt struck the floor, it diffused into the ground with no apparent effect. Mud made a note of these interactions. While it had used up its first spell, this was valuable information. By the time the bolt landed, Susie was already stabbing again with a spear. "Ha!" Although she was still far away, the extreme length of the spear made it possible for her to attack from long distances. Mud had his own means of long-distance melee, though. Taking his mental cue, Ego leapt up from a scabbard. The sword and spear collided. Susie grinned, a rapid wave of black light traveling up a spear, flooding into Ego. A wave of pain came to Mud over the soul bond. Apparently that black energy could damage Ego somehow. Hastily, Mud ordered her to return. It was not acceptable for her to be damaged. With Ego's rapid retreat, Susie stumbled forward slightly, the counter-pressure on her spear suddenly removed. Taking advantage of her awkward posture, Mud struck her with a wave of mind mana. Unfortunately, the persuade skill didn't take a hold as hoped. After entering her mind, the mana was resisted and dissipated, apparently without Susie even noticing. Ego's voice entered Mud's mind. Of course, that wouldn't work. She's completely delusional. I thought anyone could convince her of anything. Mud was inclined to agree. I still like her, though, added Ego. The Mud was less sure of. Quickly regaining her balance, Susie fired off another bolt black energy, followed up by a low sweep of the spear blade. As Mud slid away and leapt over the sword, the golem had realization. Calling the aid of Almanac, the black bolts were described. Best match, Entropy Bolt. A spell, Entropy Bolt, simplest spell of the entropy magic. This spell appears to cause struck objects to age rapidly, as well as lose energy. This kind of magic is poorly understood. So there were no tricks to it. As long as Mud avoided being struck by the bolts or spear, the fight would be simple. Both attacks had considerable reach. Mud fired an experimental bolt towards Susie. Filling her spear again with dark energy, she struck the spell out of the air. As expected, long-range combat was a poor choice. Mud needed to change tactics. After dodging another entropic bolt, Mud performed its approach maneuver, striking the sphere of its metal endoskeleton from behind, then putting itself forward with its meat hooks. Mud shot rapidly towards Susie. Ah! Susie was surprised by the rapid assault, but her stance did not falter. Raising a spear, crackling with energy across her chest, she readied it to take the blow. But blocking would not be such a simple matter with such a thin weapon. Unseen by Susie, 8 weapons blossomed below Mud's robe, spreading in all directions like the petals of a blooming flower. As Mud neared Susie, the weapon swung around his body and to the front, pulled by a combination of Golem's muddy tentacles and telekinesis. From the bottom, left and right, 4 razor-sharp blades. From the left and right, meat hooks. And from the top left and right, fist-sized hunks of metal. And from directly above, the downward swing of a beautiful blade. And of course, the cannonball of Mud's own heavy body rocketing towards her. Susie's eyes grew wide with coordinated attack. It was impossible to block all 10 different directions at the same time with a spear, especially in this configuration. As the weapons neared her, Mud felt victory was imminent. Don't think that, brother. In the dramatic fight, that's the signal for... Ego's worried voice was cut off as an orb of blackness spread outwards from Susie's body, rapidly engulfing the arena. At that moment, Mud was frozen, suspended in mid-air. It could see nothing, hear nothing, and feel nothing. It couldn't move. Even thinking was difficult. Thoughts moving sluggishly. Mud tried to open the Akashic records, but was unable to. It was a frozen world, and it was impossible to tell how much time was passing. The only sensation Mud could still feel was a soul bond with Ego Golem. Strangely, Almanac still worked. Best match, Entropic Stasis. Spell, Entropic Stasis. A zone is created in which the energy is diffused. This kind of magic is poorly understood. So, Mud was imprisoned in a magic zone. Even now, Susie might be readying some attack to finish it off. Mud needed to escape as quickly as possible. Struggling was useless. Despite sending the correct mental commands to its body, nothing happened. Physical means, it seemed, were useless. Instead, Mud decided to try a different tactic. It was just being told by magic. Perhaps it could just be countered with magic. In fact, Mud had already an ideal perfectly suited to the task. Control of self. Mud could free itself from the constraints of friction and gravity. Why not entropy as well? This body belongs to Mud, this Mud's domain, and no one else can control it. Well, it would be okay if the master did, but that's beside the point. Mud corrupted its entire mana pool into mind mana. It was vital to break out. Saving mana only to fail would be pointless. Without hesitation, Mud imbued all the corrupted mana with the concept of control and self. With the force of will, Mud unleashed a spell on itself, and the light returned. As the light returned to the world, a spear was rapidly approaching towards Mud's torso. It appeared that only a short amount of time had passed, entrapped within the realm of nothingness, despite seeming like an eternity. Mud was still in the air directly in front of Susie, but the spell had arrested his momentum. Unfortunately, suspended in the air as he was, and with no remaining mana, there was no way for Mud to dodge the incoming attack. Ego was encased in a film of pure blackness, likely still trapped within the entropy magic. she would not be able to help. In front of him, Susie's eyes opened wide in shock. Escaping from a spell so quickly had likely been outside of her expectations. Even still, her shock seemed greater than would be expected of a situation. Her spear was not coated in black magic that she had used to deflect his spells and harm Ego. That being the case, being stabbed wouldn't be a problem. As the spear made contact with Mud's amorphous flesh, Mud parted itself to allow the top to pass through without resistance. Not meeting the expected counterforce to her blow, Susie stumbled forward. At the same time, Mud pulled himself forward, wrapping 7 of his chains around Susie and her spear for leverage. Mud swung a fist-sized lump of metal directly into the mage's head. With a disgusting cracking noise, Susie fell to the arena floor, unconscious. A moment later, a form around Ego vanished, and the sword bobbed low on the floor before regaining balance and returning to Mud's back. Something was odd. The opponent, Susie, was clearly defeated. She lay unmoving on the ground in front of Mud. However, there was no cheering. The judge stood to the side, gaping at him instead of ending the fight. The entire arena was silent. "Brother, you're naked." End of chapter. Chapter 68. Minister's Malignance. There is ample evidence that demons may be involved in the disappearance of the ancient empire, or that they at least have relevant knowledge. Questions regarding the empire are one of the few subjects which a demon will absolutely refuse to answer, even to the point of dying of contract backlash. This alone is a sign that something unusual is going on. Further compounding the suspicion is the rare slip of the tongue in which a demon revealed information regarding the empire that should not be known. Over the decades, there have been rare reports of demons displaying knowledge of the ancient empire language, quirks of their society, and other trivia which could not be reasonably deduced merely from the Akashic records. Unfortunately, this is unlikely to be a useful avenue of research until a breakthrough is made in demonology. Either a method of control or a read their guarded minds or break their loyalty to one below is required, and there is no indication that such methods could be found soon. Excerpt from the history of the Akashic records. Mud looked down at his own exposed muddy torso. So that's it. Silence reigned over the ring for a time. Eventually, however, it was broken by a familiar voice. From the stands, the energetic boy yelled out, "Executioner Mud is a monster!" The silence broken, a murmur quickly broke out amongst the crowd. The judge, released from his daze, stepped forward and raised a hand above Mud. "Winner of this fight is Executioner Mud." At that, the expectant cheer finally broke out amongst the crowds. A priest of Yaldabaoth quickly ran to the side of Susie and began healing her wounds. "Oh, this is terrible! My new sheath is ruined!" While no trace of Mud's cloak now remained, the leather scabbard made by Ingrid still clung to Mud's back. The strap was wrapped around the golem's torso. It was intact, but showed signs of decades of age and neglect. The previously vibrant red was now faded to a pinkish grey, and the metal was tarnished. Mud's metal endoskeleton, as well as the bodies of Mud and Ego, showed no signs of damage. "Ego, I'll repair the scabbard as soon as possible." The sword seemed somewhat modified by the words and settled down. Mud itself felt uncomfortable wearing something worn down and damaged on his body. A butler had to look his best. Mud had examined the surrounding crowds. Despite the initial shock that Mud was not human, there appeared to be no immediate problems. There was something whispering in the crowd speculating on Mud's species, but it sounded more like curiosity than concern. The association already knew Mud as a golem, so perhaps it was for the best. As Mud thought those things, a booming impact struck the ground behind it, accompanied by a sharp spike in detect malice. Turning to look, there stood a tall, thin man in a rainbow-colored robe. Clutching in his hand, he held out an intricate statue of Yaldabaoth in the glistening white metal, eyes set with rubies. The face of the priest was twisted in rage, and the strange fire lit up in his eyes with rage. A small crater dug into the arena floor at his feet, the result of his leap from the VIP box. "Stay in the eye of the gods! Begone!" In a smooth motion, the venerable Gnostic priest lifted his arm, holding the figurine of Yaldabaoth. the obsolescent glow began to radiate from the priest's body, concentrating into the figurine. After a moment, the energy seemed to vanish all at once. The horrible pressure descended upon Mud's soul, heavier than even the contract with Jibrax. Above the golem, a spiral of rainbow light appeared in the air. From the rip in the universe, a rod of the purest white light fell towards Mud like a fist of an angry god. Mud's vision was blinded with a white light, and a horrible sound filled his mind, a song like the creation of the universe, the sound that ends the world, a cry of torments of souls. The sensations were overwhelming, but at the same time they seemed slightly muted. The horrible cacophony held the quality of traveling through dampening materials, reducing the impact. The light seemed blocked by the black silhouette, without which Mud was sure that his body would be wiped from existence. The weight on Mud's soul was being shouldered by someone else, making the pressure endurable. As the light and the sound slowly faded, Mud learned the identity of his savior. There, standing above Mud, was leader Thuggy Ghoul. Smoke rose from the black armor of Ghoul, and blood flowed from every orifice in his head. His expression was one of annoyance. "Leader Ghoul, this is a matter of the church to handle. Why do you interfere?" The priest scowled at Ghoul, apparently equally annoyed at the interruption. "This monster is under the association's protection." Thuggy looked down at the perfectly still figure of Mud between his legs. Best to let these two absurdly powerful individuals work this out amongst themselves, thought Mud. It's not like anything it could do now would make any difference. Leader Ghoul returned his sight to the priest. "Mud is a member of the Delvers Association. I can't simply allow him to be executed arbitrarily." "It's not arbitrary. Do you even know what kind of, thing you are protecting? This is not merely some magical beast." The head priest pointed an accusatory figure downwards towards Mud. "This is a construct." He seemed to spit out the word, like even saying it would put a foul taste in his mouth. "Its very existence is an insult to the Archons. The Church of the Venerable Gnostics has decreed that they must be killed on sight." Thuggy Ghoul sneered at the raging priest. "I don't care what the Church decrees. I follow the law of the Association. If you try to attack my subordinate again, I will crush you." The priest seemed to size up the towering black-armored warrior up for a moment, but quickly abandoned the idea of fighting him. Instead, he began to speak in a more diplomatic tone. "Sure, you may understand the dangers of this sort of life form is. It's not merely a matter of faith that has caused the Church to condemn constructs. They're inherently dangerous. Massive damage has already been done several times by rampaging golems. It's only a matter of time until someone goes wrong with this one. If this thing ends up destroying Galtheus, how will you take responsibility?" Murmuring spread through the crowd. Compared to the earlier fanaticism, this argument seemed much more convincing. Even Ghoul frowned in thought. After a delay, Thuggy finally replied, "I understand the threat that the golem poses to our community. If I had realized Mud was a golem before he joined the Delvers Association, I would have certainly destroyed him." Ah! Jibrax was right, it seemed, thought Mud. Mud had assumed the demon was simply overly paranoid or manipulating him in some convoluted way. But it seems that that was not the case, or perhaps she had just been right by coincidence. Somehow, that seemed more likely. However, Thuggy raised his head and made eye contact with the priest. It is now a member of the association. If your church tries to get him in my city, things are going to escalate well beyond either of us once. A moment of silence as the priest chewed over the leader's words. "For now, I suggest you leave. I'll make sure Mud here doesn't cause any problems. And besides, we need all the help we can get in the upcoming wave. You are going to help in the wave, right, Mud?" Being out of mana, Mud quickly reached the bangle wrapped around Ego and transmitted a reply to Ghoul. "Yes, I'll help with the wave. Do not destroy me." "Good." He agreed. "Well," Thuggy looked directly at the priest again. He hesitated for a moment, tightly gripping his figurine of Yaldabaoth. Eventually, though, he clenched his teeth and turned away. Walking back to the VIP section, he called over his shoulder, "This isn't over. I'll be contacting my superiors." Turning back towards Mud, Tharky spoke once more before leaving. "After this tournament is over, we're going to have a little conversation about when we first met, and about that sword on your back. On second thought, being exposed was not for the best at all." End of chapter. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, please consider supporting the author from the link down below. Otherwise, if you wish to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so, like liking, subscribing, and possibly even becoming a patron. Otherwise, the easiest way would be to share. And until the next video, I hope that you all have a good one, and I'll see you then. Cheers.